Good afternoon. I'm changing the presenter controls to you.
All right. Put this to the side. And good afternoon, everyone. Hope you're not experiencing heat stroke right now because the heat index is really high for Illinois. I'm located in Elgin. I don't know how where all of you are, but if you're anywhere near me, it's pretty blistering outside. So thank you for coming today. And today we're going to talk about searcher behaviors and search experience optimization. And that's a very new term, search experience optimization. And the reason it's so new is that in the past, search engine optimization meant to a lot of people optimizing for search engines only. Search experience optimization adds the searcher into the equation. But if you're a search engine optimizer like myself, I've always been optimizing for the searcher because the searcher is the one who's going to add to cart, sign up for a webinar, attend an event. Google's not going to add to cart, the searcher is. So for those of you who haven't met me, this is just quick bio. I attended University of Illinois Library and Information Science Department, specializing in search interfaces. And we're going to go over this building block. And really important for people to understand this building block because searcher goals and behaviors have been ranking factors since the mid to late 1990s. So it's important to understand what your user goals are and understand how people use Google, Yahoo, and Bing to arrive at your website. So what we'll do today is just a quick review of things that I think you should remember above all else. We'll go over a taxonomy of web search. This is also one of the items that I uploaded for you. What I did is I uploaded some of the most important publications about web searcher behaviors, and one of them is the latest version of Google's quality rater guidelines, so I hope you find that informative. We'll go over the taxonomy of web search and how you can best optimize your site and portions of your site for that. We'll quickly go over mobile queries, but you'll see that it's a subset of web search queries. We'll go over entity search, which is hugely important, and how to optimize for entity search. And part of that optimization process is optimizing for graphic images. We'll go over some challenges that we might have because the bottom line is if you're optimizing for people, you're optimizing for Google. If you're optimizing for people, you're optimizing for Yahoo. If Yahoo, Google, and Bing have to catch up, so be it. Let them catch up. Always optimize for users first. So I have some tips and recommendations, some good examples, as well as some semi-good examples, and we should have time for questions and answers. So again, this is what I've been talking about all along, is optimizing for people who use search engines. This could be thought of as search experience optimization, but since searcher behaviors has been a ranking factor for so many years, I consider it part of the search engine optimization process. As we go through this presentation, you're going to see how search engine optimization is a part of findability in the user experience, because web searchers do genuinely ask their colleagues what helps and what does not help them locate and discover desired content. Of the 4 fundamental building blocks, I skipped to number 4 because link development and social signals is a whole different animal, and we'll talk about that next week. And basically what we want to know is, does your website accommodate these following known and well-established searcher behaviors? And if the answer is yes, your site will tend to rank well. If the answer is no, site probably won't rank as well. But know that all 4 building blocks need to be in place in order to get the best results. This is something that's considered off-the-page criteria, and this is something we don't have control over. We can't control what user goals are. We can't control over how people learn how to search. We as librarians are fantastic searchers, and for us it's very, very easy to formulate queries and find what we want. But for the average web user, they're very poor at queries. In fact, this is something that I really believe should be taught in schools, not as well, you know, all the way from kindergarten on up, as soon as kids know how to type. But we're a long way from that, but hopefully we'll get there. So the first building block, what did I want you to remember about keywords and labels? And these are on the page criteria. First, create a clear and consistent labeling system, because you want search engines to accurately determine aboutness. You want users to accurately determine aboutness. So you have document labels, navigation labels, and content labels. And the aboutness of all your web documents should appear prominently on top of the document, whether it's a graphic image, a PDF, or an HTML page, so that people don't have to scroll to figure out what your content's about. Last week we went over architecture and navigation, and what I wanted you to remember about architecture and navigation is that a library's website is going to have a very complex information architecture. You're going to architect based on your target audience, because most libraries have diverse sets of users, and each group has common tasks they like to complete. So having that base architecture is so important, because it's going to be the skeleton on which everything else is based on. If you have a blog, you're going to use time and date. If you archive things, you're going to have an architecture based on that. And if you have a site index, then that's something that will likely be alphabetical. I gave you a URL list, and any of you that don't have this URL list, just contact me or Louise, and we will be more than happy to send you the URL checklist. And we also want you to have 5 types of website navigation. And not every library website is going to need a utilities menu, but pretty much every library website that I've ever seen is going to have global, local, contextual, and supplemental. And contextual and supplemental website navigation is very important for SEO. So what do I want you to remember mostly about today? What I want you to remember more than anything else are these 3 words: go, know, and do. And this is from one of the files that I uploaded for you called A Taxonomy of Web Search by Andre Broder. And this is what we're going to go over today, his Taxonomy of Web Search. And this is not in any particular order. I just put navigational, informational, and transactional. Informational queries are absolutely the most common type of web search query. Navigational queries are the second most common type, upwards of 33% or more. On mobile devices in particular are navigational queries. And transactional queries are the least common type of search engine query. And it doesn't always mean add to cart. Listening to music and getting lyrics are also types of transactional queries. So let's go over the first one, navigational intent. A web searcher that has navigational intent wants to go to a specific website or a web page, or they're trying to go back to a previously visited website or web page. And the reason this is called a navigational query is that web searchers are using a search engine to go to a specific website. And if a web searcher's goal is navigational, then in a search listing, the following items are important. And I'm just going to escape here and go quickly to a different screen. Okay, here we have a search listing for Chicago Public Library. It has a title, it has a URL, and it has a snippet. For people who have navigational intent, The title is very important to them in the search listing, and the URL is very important to them in the search listing. What people find a little disconcerting is when they go to, for example, I am going to search for user experience honeycomb, and I'll make this a little bigger so you all can see it. So user experience honeycomb, because I use this all of the time and I usually cite it. And a lot of other people who are in the information architecture and the user experience industries use this all the time. So they're looking for user experience honeycomb here in the search listing. And also if they're looking for Chicago Public Library and they type in the Chicago Public Library locations, they're looking for it here. And that's what we want when we are thinking about accommodating navigational queries, are having the keyword in the URL structure, the file name, as well as the domain name. There are different ways you can look at your web analytics software and see that people are typing in navigational queries. One of them is portions of a URL. Chicago Public Library's URL or domain name is a shortened version of words. So this could be an indicator of I want to go to a specific website. One or two keywords usually can mean people want to go to a specific website. If you see .com, .edu, .org, .gov, those are all clear indicators of a navigational query, and the appearance of site links in search listings. So here is Chicago Public Library, and if you see site links appear in Google, that means that some of those keywords or all of those keywords are a part of a navigational query. So you can see that they do have site links here in Bing. In Bing they call them web links, they don't call them site links. And in the Chicago Public Library site, you also see these items appear. So you don't see all of these site links appear, you only see these 4. These are also indicators of navigational keywords. Now the good thing about having a good information architecture and having a good labeling system is that if you have 2 site links in search listings, it increases click-through rates by more than 30%. And I thought I'd give a shout out to Rails that they do have these 2-line site links called out. And Chicago Public Libraries also has it too. So that's very, very good indication that the labels and architecture are great. Now, the most important search query, I believe, is the query where somebody wants to go to your website. Not just your home page, but a page within your website. So one of the first things I do to test out if my site is search engine friendly is to look for navigational queries and how well your site appears. So first of all, search for your official name. What is the name of your library? If you have an official name like Fountaindale Library or Gail Borden Library, that's great. Do the site links appear? And if they do, that means your site's accommodating web searcher goals. And if you see any site links you don't want to appear, there's something you can do about that. If there's a common abbreviation for your library, I usually don't see that. I usually see this on government websites, like OSHA, for example, OSHA. Search for that as well. Search for city and public library. And also search with and without advanced search operators. So if we go to Google, we're going to show you some examples of these. So I'm going to look for Elgin Public Library. And even though the searcher did not know the name of the public library, they still got the right search listing. However, if the person knew what the search listing was, Gail Borden Public Library, you get a better search listing. So one of the things I did was Springfield Public Library. Now, I happen to be in Illinois, so Google has correctly interpreted that I'm in Illinois, but if you also enter the term for Lincoln Library, and this is a search I did earlier this morning, look what shows up. Fox River Grove Public Library. There's the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library Foundation. So you have to be very careful about how well you optimize. So if you make sure that you put the city name, the state name, spelling out the city name and the state name in your titles and within your content, that will go a long way to helping your site appear properly for search listings. The other thing I like to do is something called an advanced search operator. And that's where you type in the keyword phrase site : and the official URL or domain of your website, and then type in the various topics that you talk about. So on the Chicago Public Library site, ebooks shows up, and there's other places that talk about ebooks. So this looks like the Chicago Public Library has accommodated for searcher behaviors. But we also want to go and do things like the Gail Borden Public Library. So if we go back to Gail Borden, and we get their official, URL, gailborden.info, and you go site : gailborden.info, and let's say we do ebooks. Does Google turn in the proper search results? And if the answer is yes, then you've got a decent labeling system. So I know this seems time-consuming, but the one thing I tell people is if you don't accommodate searcher as well as search engine behaviors, you can't expect to rank well in search engines because they're not interpreting your content's aboutness very well. So take the time to do this and make sure that you're getting this portion of SEO right. So that is navigational intent. This very most important type of search engine query in terms of volume is informational intent. Informational intent is about anywhere from 63 to 80% of search engine queries. And they're extremely common on mobile devices as well as desktop devices. Informational intent means I want to learn or know more about a topic. It can be an answer to a question. The answer could be a quick fact, or if it's a complex answer, not so quick fact. Anytime you see in the United States the plural form of a word, a lot of times it's an indicator that a person wants a list. And the word review or reviews is actually a keyword that indicates informational intent. So we want to see how well our site accommodates informational queries. So first things first, make sure your site accommodates navigational queries. And then as you go further down the optimization stepladder, you will see that you might need to refine things a little further. So question words. Have you included question words where people expect to see them? Have you optimized your pages for four or more keywords? If you have a list of items, have you accommodated for the plural form of the word instead of the singular form of the word? And what are examples of a web page that commonly have question words? FAQs, or frequently asked questions, or Q&A. A more technical term might be a knowledge base. Customer service, help. These are sections that should be on a library website. What is the most common type of web page that is a plural? A category page or a subcategory page? So These are the pages that we would really want to see in search listings. But here are some ways that you can further accommodate this stuff. So one of them is an answer to a question. Answers to a question could be on an FAQ page. They could be on a reference page, such as an acronym list. One of the things I like to do for people is create an alphabetized acronym list for specific industries, because a lot of people that encounter these acronyms half of them don't know what they mean. Any type of how-to or any kind of guide that will help people. So here is an example from Chicago Public Libraries. Now I wanted to use Chicago Public Library System as an example because there's some things on their website they did extraordinarily well, and there are some things on their website that I want you to watch out for. And one of the things that they did very well was this part right here, expand all, and when you click on it, collapse all. This was something in the FAQs report from Nielsen Norman Group that I highly recommended for you. And this is great for people who want to review the whole list. But if you want to only look at one answer to a question, all you need to do is click on the question. Now, what the Chicago Public Library website did not do well is you can't very much tell that these links are clickable. Simply changing the color to a shade of blue or some other color that indicates clickability would make this appear a lot more intuitive. So that would be the only thing I would change about this. They grouped FAQs by category, and I think you'll find that the better the library site, the better you have grouped the most common questions by your patrons, and that's what I recommend that your site does. Now, keeping in mind these are from search engine optimizers, websites, you can see that people do search for one-word or two-word queries far more frequently than anything else. There's another website that they show the number of keywords by country, but the thing to remember about keyword length is try not to get too concerned about length, but to be concerned about quality. Why are your sites not appearing? Are they not appearing because you don't have clear labels? Are they not appearing because you haven't provided good accessibility to them? Are they not appearing because you haven't provided good link development to them, or none or all of the above? And that is what you should focus on as opposed to the average number of words in a query. But these are some resources just so you can learn about that. Now there is something new in 2016 from Google, and what I have included in your download list is the search quality guidelines from the quality raters for 2016, and they have broken down informational queries from no and no simple. So quick fact queries have been broken out, and these are queries that can be answered in 1 or 2 sentences. For queries that cannot be answered in 1 or 2 sentences for multiple reasons, they might be complex, they might be controversial, these are your standard queries that most sites need to have. You can look this up, just search for no simple in the Search Quality Rater Guidelines PDF, and you'll be led right to the content. So if you want to see an idea of the no simple, just do the term definition with any term. So in this case, I use the word epilepsy. And I might add that some of my clients do include people who write dictionaries as well as encyclopedias, so I'm more than familiar with having these types of items appear in search queries. It is very important that you do include the question word in the title tag, as well as the heading, and as well as answering the question as quickly and easily as possible. So you'd be surprised. Question words like who is Benjamin Franklin can also appear in search listings. Now, what we learned from working with these encyclopedia and dictionary websites is you don't necessarily get higher clicks for taking up more screen real estate in Google, but you do get the recognition that your site is an authority figure or has a lot of experience in this area. And this is where I'd like to see library websites show up much better, is in these no simple queries. So transactional intent, this is our third type of search engine query. And transactional intent doesn't only include add to cart. It includes downloading PDFs, downloading videos, downloading music, looking at pictures, watching a video, looking up lyrics. And there is a very, very good table in the PDF document that I gave you by Bernard Jansen and Amanda Spink, so I highly recommend that you print that page out and keep a copy of that table for quick viewing. And it's the least common type of search engine query. And I tend to find that with transactional queries that a lot of people won't interact unless they do research first. So I will only do something after I see it on a web page first. So what are the things we can look for transactional queries? We tend to find interaction verbs, activity nouns, as well as specific file extensions. So if you see any of these in your web analytics report, know that these are indicators of transactional queries. And so that's another exercise that I have people do when I work on websites, is I go through their web analytics and I want to see what types of search queries are leading people to their websites. So here's an example of items I might be looking for on a certain type of website. And a location finder is very important for libraries like the Chicago Public Library. And this is an example from one of their older versions of their website. And I kept this hoping that I would use it someday, and I'm glad I did. Now this is one thing that the Chicago Public Library site could do better, and that is their library locator. So here is a library locator on their website. Now what they were smart to do was putting a map of all locations. And that is fantastic. So this isn't what the map would look like, but this is how the individual Harold Washington Library site might look. So let's look at their current website. And we see Chicago Public Library locations. And they did this by a jump menu. So you can go from library webpage to library webpage based on this drop-down menu. Well, here's the thing. It's not all search engines will follow jump menus. Not all search engines, if we go back to this website, will fill out a form. They will follow a link like this. So one of the things that I recommend that people who have multiple locations do is, first of all, don't rely on people filling out a zip code. Don't rely on having these auto-filled based on location. Have a link that search engines as well as users can easily follow to make sure that a search engine has easy access to this. And one of the things that this jump menu does is it forces people to do something called pogo sticking. And pogo sticking is what's called a negative search behavior. Pogo sticking means a person has to jump back and forth. They have to jump map of all locations, here's the library page. Map of all locations, here's the library page. Map of all locations, here's the library page. The best thing to do is to put nearby links on the actual web page. So if we're in the Albany Park section of the website, it gives the things that are most important to the users. What are the hours they're open, and contact information. But what are the Washington Library branches nearest this? This is a very simple way of connecting library content in a contextual way. So try not to pogo stick. Try to put things in the proper context. So those contextual links actually make a big difference. And another type of contextual link would be a link that's in a sitemap or a site index. So also having them there as well. So we don't want people doing this. That's called pogo sticking. Now here's another thing. What is the URL structure of the Harold Washington Library Center? It says locations 15. What would be a better name for this URL? Harold Washington Library. So this is another way that I would improve on the labeling system in the Chicago Public Library. So I wanted to pause here to see if there were any questions before I jump on to the next topics.
Hi, Shari. No, we have not received any questions yet.
Okay, perfect. So we'll keep moving on. Now I only put 2 items here for mobile queries. The thing to know about mobile queries is that when people use a mobile device, it's very contextual. They're usually looking for a quick fact, and in fact quick fact queries are extraordinarily common on mobile phones. They're looking for location-based information, so where is the nearest restaurant to me? Where can I drop off the library books? For example, near me in Elgin, there are multiple places I could drop off library books for Gail Borden Library. That's a type of information people will want to know. And personal information, like if I want to log in to something. So here's a trick question. And notice I said that it's a trick question. If I want to log in to, let's say it's called Yahoo Mail or Google Mail or Gmail, is this a navigational, informational, or transactional query, and why? This would have made a good poll question, but I just came up with it. A lot of people think that logging in to Yahoo Mail or Google Mail is a transactional query because the user wants to do something online. They want to log in. However, people can't log into email until they go to a specific website first. And for people who travel, they can't go look at their frequent flyer miles until they go to the website first. So even though people might type in a transactional keyword, you do have to look at the context of the keywords that people are typing into the search engine. And that's what I mean by personal information for mobile queries. Now, this is something from a research paper done a few years ago, but I loved this table in this particular document, and it shows the different types of information needs that are triggered by context. And just so you know, people don't like to do transactions on mobile devices unless they have to, so such as checking in at an airport, because forms are extremely difficult to fill out on a mobile device. So just know that quick fact, location, and personal information, and these are the variety of contextual queries that you will see on a mobile phone. The next topic I want to cover is something called entity search, and this has been in existence for quite some time, and there's been a good deal of search engine research about this. And what's really important to know about entities is that it's a thing or concept that is blah, blah, blah from Google, blah, blah, blah. Basically, an entity is a noun. It's a person, place, or a thing. So that is the fancy schmancy technical term for it. With entity searches, we group these into known entities, and we might know this from library science school and our experience, or known item searches, partially known items, or unknown entities. And this is from this outstanding book that from Springer, and I'll go through these types of entities and how to optimize for them. Now, if a person knows the name of an entity, they tend to use that label. That's why it's important to use the user's language, because most people will use the entity name and they won't do a lot of search queries. So who is this person? For those of you who are big movie fans, this is Cate Blanchett, and this is this photo source of her photo there, and it's not bad. First of all, JPEG, the file name indicates that it's a photo. I would use a hyphen rather than an underscore, and it wouldn't include any spaces in the URL. But for the most part, it's a pretty good URL structure. And people who are doing informational searches on Cate Blanchett will do this. They'll just type in her name, and they'll click on the link that is the most valuable to them. And this is a little trick to know. Whenever you see Wikipedia appear at the top of the web page in particular, it's a very, very, very strong indication that's an informational query. And this is called a fishing expedition. Another name for it is called an ad hoc query. And since Google doesn't know what you want to know about Cate Blanchett, it will deliver a lot of different items. The known item searching is pretty straightforward. It's just labeling things in a way that people understand. So let's say a person wants to go to the National Cancer Institute website. What's that person going to type in? National Cancer Institute or cancer.gov. And we see that the site links appear. So this is very likely a navigational query first, and then we see Wikipedia appear, and then it also shows informational intent. So let's say a person wants information about the Eiffel Tower. Well, if you just type in Eiffel Tower, you're going to get a wide variety of search results, but at the top you can see that the navigational query is accommodated first and foremost. And then you see Wikipedia, meaning that it has both informational as well as navigational intent. So I want to go to the Gail Borden Library website. Okay, so if somebody types in Gail Borden Library, they get the information they need. But what if they didn't know that the name of the Elgin Library in Illinois, and there's a lot of different Elgins throughout the United States too. What if you didn't know the name of the library? Then you would probably take this approach. A generic description, you might look at graphic images, 18% of people will look at Wikipedia, and once the name of the entity is learned, that's what the searcher will use in subsequent queries. That's one of the reasons I highly recommended that you see how well you have accommodated searcher goals by putting in the city name and public library. Or if you are a different type of library, like let's say your University of Chicago Law Library. Okay, we got the DeLangelo Law Library. So that was very, very well done. But not all libraries do that. So let's look at some partially known entities. Here is an entity. It's a thing. It's a noun. What is it? Well, people don't know quite what this is. They'll say, okay, it's a curved sword. And a lot of people will click on Wikipedia and go, hey, this is what I want because it's telling me the different types of swords. I'm going to learn the label. And then they get this and they go, what the heck is that? And they're far more colorful in their language than what I just said. Then they go back and then they might click on the images and they're going to try and look for the label. And then once they learn it's called a scimitar, and for those of you who saw Raiders of the Lost Ark and Harrison Ford shooting the guy that goes nee, 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 that's what this was used in. There might be an item where a person knows partial data about it. So there's a museum in Paris that's called in a railway station or a car. So they'll type in Paris Museum Railcar, and that's when they go, what the heck is that? Well, maybe I'll use the word railway instead. And hey, that first search result looks pretty good. And then they get the correct information, the Musée d'Orsay, and you can see that Wikipedia is appearing first, so it's a very strong indicator that these keywords are informational in nature. So they don't want to click the Wikipedia listing, so they will click Musée d'Orsay home. Ta-da! Now what happened in this example? The searcher knew it was the name of a museum in Paris. The search query first did not make any sense, so the searcher decided to do some sort of query refinement or query reformulation. The auto-suggestion tool gave the strongest information sent, and after that, the searcher tended to remember the name of the Musée d'Orsay. And if they didn't remember it, they would try the same query all over again. From when web searchers have a difficult time finding information, that's when you'll see a lot of query reformulation. For people who are advanced searchers, you'll see the plus sign, the minus sign, the in title or the in URL that I showed you earlier, and they'll spend a longer time on search engine results pages. And even highly skilled searchers, when they can't find something, this is when they will reach out to their colleagues. So collaborative search. And remember what I showed you in the beginning, that finding occurs with browsing, asking, and then searching. So even people who are advanced finders will ask colleagues. And it's really funny to watch these people. Watching them bite their nails or their facial expressions is really, really neat to watch. I love my job. It's so fun to watch searchers in action. And finally, if a person doesn't know the name of the entity and they can't find the meaning, they will give up after about 9.5 queries. So what are things that you can do to help your content be findable for entity search? One of them is to do tilde searches and seeing the words that are associated with the person, place, or thing. So here we see on this Google search results page that Louvre is highlighted. So even if the person was looking for the Musée d'Orsay, a lot of people think that they might be looking for the Louvre. But this is where your labeling system is extremely important, and I spent a lot of time on this topic, is to always provide the right labeling system and also to provide context. And context is really, really going to help your site. So one of the ways to provide context is to optimize your graphic images. And I will show you how to do this. I will also show you related keywords you can look for, just like the tilde search. If you have Wikipedia information, look at your Wikipedia listing and see if you can adjust your listing to make sure that it's factually accurate. And the other thing to do is to treat every page as a point of entry. Whenever I write an article on search engine optimization, for example, or information architecture, I will always spell out what SEO means or what IA means, because IA has different meanings in different industries. And once you get in the habit of treating your web pages as a point of entry, you will naturally write more accurate labels and more accurate metadata. So let's take a look at what I would do for graphic image optimization. What search engines look at is the title of the pages where the image is located. They're looking at your content copies. They're looking at your headings and your subheadings. They're looking at text that's at the top of the page. They're looking at text around hypertext links, so their contextual linking structure. They're looking at metadata. They're looking at alternative text. And they're looking at not only the URL structure of the page that contains the graphic image, they're also looking at the URL of the graphic image itself. So an example of file format, which is really important for transactional queries, is the file format. So if you have a JPEG usually means that the item's a photo. And so if somebody enables something atm-machine.jpg, it's probably a photo. If you see the file extension ping, PNG, or GIF, sometimes people say GIF, it usually means it's a graphic image. And one of the things I like to do is when I put alternative text inside of a graphic image, I'll always say whether it's a photo, an illustration, a diagram, a pie chart, or whatever. So let's look at an example, and I'm doing this on a medical website, and this is not a current client of mine. I'm just using it as an example. Can you identify what this is a graphic image of? Looks like it's a heart attack. So were you right? Most likely. Now let's look at the page that this image is on. Okay, so what is Google looking at? They're looking at the URL structure. Heart attack is on here. We see it here in the page heading. We see it here in text at the top of the page. And it links to a heart attack article. And here's the actual image itself. And here it includes heart attack illustration, myocardial infarction. So it has the medical term as well as the patient term. And that's one of the reasons that that particular web graphic image helps for entity search. Alternative text is text that appears in the event that a graphic image doesn't load, and this is what the HTML code is. And it's very important for accessibility. But make sure that whenever you label something like this, I try to put if it's a diagram, I try to put if it's an illustration. I make it very clear what that graphic image is to make it easier to find. So make sure you format them properly, use the user's language. When it's appropriate, use captions and subheadings. And if you can't create captions or subheadings, make sure the pages that contain it is optimized for keyword phrases. Try to provide multiple points of access to images. Don't only use it once unless you have a good reason not to. And this will help your site immensely when people are doing entity searches. So finally, before we get to question and answers, I do want to remind people that search engines are far from perfect. They're not always going to get aboutness correct, even with the best of intentions. And the other thing to remember also is that Google, Yahoo, and Bing certainly do have commercial intent. If you can do this for the majority of queries that people use to find your site, then great. You're doing well, but I would not expect 100%. Google might not always get searcher intent properly. The primary example of this is if somebody's looking for a mouse. Are you referring to a computer mouse, or are you referring to the cute fuzzy little mouse? And not everybody thinks a mouse is cute and fuzzy, particularly my two cats. They consider the mouse to be dinner. The idea behind this is whenever you see the word computer mouse on a web page, it's associated with computer. It's associated with a tablet. It has a different set of context, like rodent you wouldn't expect to be used with computer mouse. And search engines are looking for that context. So make sure the pages that contain your most important keyword phrases do have that context on there. And one of the things I like to do is give that 5-second usability test that I described to in an earlier presentation, where you show people a web page for 5 seconds and then ask them to write down everything they remember about that web page. And that helps you get a more accurate idea of a person's mental models. And then once you do that, and you also treat every page as a point of entry, you're going to provide context as well as very good navigation labels and content labels and document labels. So this is where I'm back to the tilde search. This is why I find the tilde search particularly useful, because when I was doing this keyword research for a museum site, I wanted to see what words were associated with museum. So for this particular website, what we ended up doing for the Musée d'Orsay is showing where it was located in reference to the Louvre, because we saw this in Google search results. The other thing is knowing if the searcher has navigational or informational intent, because sometimes a searcher wants to repeat a query because it worked before. Now, this doesn't always work because search engines change their search results all of the time. But for me, what I try to do is to go into my web analytics. And what I'm trying to see is what searchers have already done. Were they in a specific geographic location? What language were they using? And what context were they providing in addition to the context that I am seeing with the tilde searches and the other keyword research tools that I'm actually using? So we look at web analytics. We want to see an increase in navigational queries. So people will type in, Chicago Pub Library, and then they put the keyword in there. What are things that people are not finding and getting a 404 error page? And over time, are people coming to your website and they're not always going to your homepage first? These are all really good indicators here that your site's doing better for accommodating searcher goals. The other thing to worry about is knowing that search engines actually that people click on. So Google knows that I'm located in Illinois. When I go to New York or I go to San Francisco, Google knows that I'm in New York or in San Francisco. And a lot of search professionals do vanity searches, and website owners. They want to see how they're doing, and they're also looking at competitor websites. And search engines also value recency or freshness, but the problem with that is that short-term interests are not consistent with long-term interests. So what I like to do is to stay focused on the users. So if I find I'm getting too much into the data and I'm not spending enough time actually watching people search, sitting with people at the reference desk, which I'm sure many of you do, and I will try to make those better regardless of how Google is interpreting the aboutness of my pages. Another way of saying this is if the aboutness of the pages is very clear to searchers and search engines, if Google's getting it wrong, then too bad for Google. I'm going to keep the labeling system. So I make sure my labeling system is great. I'm trying to minimize duplication. I'm making sure my URL structure is allowing for easy accessibility, and I'm also archiving properly. I'm not redirecting people to pages that no longer exist. So this is a question that came out both times in previous sessions, and one way to minimize content duplication is to use the robots exclusion protocol. And the sign I use for this, for people who are not technical, is it's a text file. It's a very straightforward text file. It's not done in Microsoft Word. It's not done in WordPerfect or any other type of item like that. It's just straight text from an HTML editor that you just put these things in there. User agent means any search engine, don't follow the pages in this directory. So if you have your technical team create a URL structure so that all of your search results only appear in this folder, you're telling a search engine, don't follow these pages. And this is so useful in minimizing duplicate content. There's another way to do it. One is to log into Google, go into the search console, and click URL parameters. Now this is from a different site, but if you put a folder named search You can say, Google, don't crawl these pages, and that's the alternative way of telling Google to not crawl your catalog. These are the URLs for reference for those of you who are interested in that. You are also free to contact me, just call me or drop me an email. I'm more than happy to answer your questions. And that was a lot to swallow, but what did I want you to remember? Go, know, and do. Navigational, informational, transactional. Does your website accommodate all three types of these queries for each target audience group? Test to see if the search engines are picking up the right pages, and if they're not, refine your labeling system, refine your site navigation and information architecture. Go into Google Webmaster Console and make sure you're not indirectly blocking things that you don't want to block. Always make sure that your site meets navigational goals, because a person who wants to go to a specific page in your website should be able to go directly there. If you have known entities, partially known entities, and unknown entities, graphic image optimization will help your users understand what the proper terminology is. That's one of the reasons that I believe library websites should have a really substantial help or FAQ section that includes screenshots that are clearly labeled. You'll find that people will use these once they're able to access them and they learn about them, and over time add screenshot after screenshot. So again, any of you that have questions, please let me know, and we have time for the Q&A for today.
All right, thank you so much, Shari. I appreciate that. I haven't received any questions, so maybe in these last couple minutes as I'm talking, somebody will type something in. I just wanted to comment, before I was at Rails, I was a reference librarian for like 8 years and sat on website redesign committees and things like that, and I really wish I had sat in on your webinars, before all of that. So I've been finding these really helpful, and I hope our participants have as well.
I really think that it's important for people to take the time and go in and write the city name. So let's say it's LaGrange Public Library. Now, they're going to put this in autocomplete because Google's keeping track of my searches, but is the right library appearing? Yeah. And once we know what the library's name is, lagrangelibrary.org, go back. What are the various categories that your website has? Go site : LaGrange Library, oops, that was Gailborn, lagrangelibrary.org. What is storytelling time? Are people landing at the right place?
Yeah, a lot of good things to think about.
So I would really highly recommend that people do that. And remember, your labeling system is so important, and your way your articles connect to each other are extremely important. And if you don't get that right, I wouldn't expect a search engine to get it right.
Right. All right. Well, I still haven't received any questions, so I think we'll go ahead and finish here. I did record today's session. Thank you, Shari, again for allowing us to do that, and I'll get that posted on the Rails website as soon as possible. So this was session 4 out of 5, so we've got one more next week on July 28th at 1:30. So we'll see everyone next week. So thank you, Shari.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, bye-bye.